After 2.5 years, Limbus company has finally gotten a brand new She Association identity. And in Season 6, we're diving into the East branch of the association, with their unique bow blades and their wielder, She East Section 3 Faust. As expected of a She identity, Faust looks cool and has a unique playstyle. But is she any good? Well, you probably won't like the answer. In today's video I will go over our newest unit, by first looking at her kit and then checking out her performance in combat in the Bleed and Poise teams. And we'll end off with a glimmer of hope on why I think she was designed this way. But before we start, I have to remind you that most of my viewers are not subscribed. So if you find yourself coming back to my videos or end up enjoying this one, consider subscribing. It takes just a second and helps me out a lot. Without further ado, let's get to Faust. We'll begin with her kit. Faust has fairly average health, speed and defense level, and her sin affinity spread consists of Wrath, Pride and Lust, with a Lust defense. Her first skill is Cleave. It rolls up to 14, gains coin power from a combination of Poise on Faust and Bleed on the enemy, gives Faust 2 Poise on use, and inflicts a total of 3 bleed. Her second skill is Positioning Maneuver. It clashes at up to 20, gains clash power from Poise and Bleed, and deals extra damage based on Poise and arrows spent. On use it gives Faust 1 Poise count. The coins of the skill inflict 2 bleed potency and count, and also give Faust 2 Poise. Her third skill is Glimmering Bow, which has 4 coins, rolls up to 24, gets coin power from Poise and Bleed, and has the same damage conditionals as skill 2. On use, Faust gets 2 Poise count. The coins of the skill give Faust 2 Poise, inflict 2 bleed count and 4 potency, and critting gives back 1 Poise count, inflicts 1 more bleed count, and also inflicts 2 defense level down next turn. Faust also gets a secondary skill 3, and this one is called Bow's Glimmer. It has very low base and coin power normally, but scales greatly with Poise and target aim. Faust also gets Poise from target aim, and that effect is also responsible for the damage buffs this skill gets. Notably, the damage buff increases greatly once you hit 4 stacks of target aim. After attack, Faust loses most of the poise she gained from target aim, as well as the ready to lose and target aim effects. The 1 coin of the skill inflicts Lodged Arrow, and consumes 1 arrow on Faust. On kill, the coin gives Faust Life Render, and on crit kill, it also gives Faust 4 poise count. As for Faust's defensive skill, she gets a normal guard called Unfold Bowblade. If Faust is about to use Bow's Glimmer, she uses Evade instead, and when she has Ready to Lose, she gets Shield, which becomes smaller the more target aim she has. At turn end, if Faust has Ready to Lose and didn't attack this turn, she gets 1 target aim, and if she does not have that effect and has arrows, she gets it alongside a stack of target aim. The entire defensive skill turns into Evade if Faust is out of arrows. Speaking of her Evade, it's the most basic Evade possible, and it gives 1 poise count on Evade up to 3 times per turn. Moving on to Faust's passives, she has 2. Snipe Archery makes her leftmost attack skill turn into her skill 3 too, and that skill is used at combat start. Also, if at 4 target aim, Faust's skill 3 is not on the dashboard, her defensive skill will count as her skill 3 and will proc Bow's Glimmer. Bow's Glimmer takes on the sin affinity of the converted skill, and gains buffs based on which skill was used to activate it, with the buffs increasing from skill 1 to skill 3. Also, if an ego skill was used, Ready to Lose is removed, and Bow's Glimmer is not used. Faust's second passive requires 3 Lust Owned to activate, and its effect is as follows. At 4 arrows, whenever Faust gains poise potency from base attack skills, she also gains 1 poise count. This effect activates 3 times per encounter, and this cap is reset when the amount of arrows goes down to 3. Also, after using Bow's Glimmer at 2 or more target aim, Faust gains 2 slash damage up next turn. And Faust's support passive requires 4 Lust Resonance and gives the ally that inflicted the most bleed potency last turn 1 pierce damage up. Before moving on to She-Faust's combat performance, let's look at the unique skills that she works with. Arrows She are just Faust's unique ammo. They stack up to 4 and Faust enters the fight with that amount. Ready to Lose is Faust's bow stance. Its effect describes the same behavior as her first passive, but it also makes Faust immune to stagger by damage or tremor, takes away her ability to perform assist attacks, and is removed when Faust uses Ego. Target aim simply stacks up to 4, and is effectively just charge for Faust's skill 3 too. Lodged Arrow stacks up to 4 as well, and at turn start it inflicts bleed potency by the effect stack. The enemy inflicted with the effect also loses defense level equal to stack, and at 2 or more lodged arrow, that enemy is inflicted with fragile as well. The effect expires when the enemy leaves the fight, or when they purge debuffs on themselves. When that happens, Faust gets back the same amount of arrows that were lodged inside of the enemy. And Life Render is a simple buff, providing 2 offense level and 1 power for 1 turn. Now we can move on to Faust in combat. And there's a lot to talk about. First of all, let me just mention the flavor on this kit. All these 4s in the effects and modifiers are, of course, in reference to She meaning 4 in Japanese and the number 4 having significance in Japanese culture. Honestly, her kit got me feeling like I'm playing Jin in League of Legends all over again. Also, Faust is the only She association identity that we have access to that does not have any scars. Which is also why, unlike every other unit from this faction, Faust does not get stronger at low HP. Pretty cool detail. Okay, now onto the actual combat performance. Generally, what can Faust do? Well, she's got a bow blade, and you get to choose the bow or the blade. You can opt to use her normal skills as you would with any identity, thus playing her as a typical Blois character. This mode has a lot of issues, but we'll get to everything wrong with this unit a bit later. As for the good parts, the blade attacks inflict some nice bleed count, and a decent amount of potency. Additionally, she's mono slash this way, so Faust can effectively take advantage of the slash fragility inflicted by the Kurokumo duo. Also, her sin affinities help her fuel sanguine desire, which is always valuable on the bleed team. Outside of slashing at the enemies like normal, Faust can also opt to press her defensive skill, guarding herself and entering the bow stance as long as she has arrows. While in that bow stance, Faust can continue guarding over and over to build up stacks of target aim. Once she hits 4, you can choose any skill available on the dashboard. Or if there is no skill tree among the 3 visible skills, you can defend once again. This shoots the arrow that Faust has been holding all this time, dealing immense damage. You can shoot earlier, but doing so will result in far less damage. Additionally, Faust gains poise with her skill tree too, based on target aim, meaning that a fully charged shot will always crit, and shooting earlier runs the risk of you missing the crit chance. That being said, if you got a sufficient amount of poise on Faust via outside effects, you can consider using the faster shots to stack up Lodged Arrow. This is pretty much all there is to Faust's gameplay loop. You either use her skills as normal and benefit from her bleed infliction, or you go for the big bow shot for a lot of damage after a long wind-up. I treat this as an either-or because charging up Bow's Glimmer is a big commitment. But on longer encounters, such as Refraction Railway 5 Section 1, you can make use of both sides of your kit in tandem, if you know what you're doing, that is. Last thing to mention is that as a Poise Faust identity, this unit gets access to Thoracalgia, which is a nice button to press for extra poise count and sustained healing. If you're going to run She-Faust for some reason, make sure to give her this ego skill. This is where the good things end, and it's time for me to rip the new Faust apart. Yes, we're talking about the bad things now. And there are a lot of issues with this identity. So many, in fact, that I needed to preemptively write them down so I don't forget any of them. The first glaring issue with Faust's kit is her insane lack of poise generation. Faust's skills provide very little poise count, meaning that keeping up a stack is nigh impossible. Her passive tries to help, but quickly hits its cap. And while you can reset the cap by using Bow's Glimmer, even with the passive up, the poise issues do not get resolved, as unlike other Season 6 poise identities that struggle with stacking, Faust doesn't just fall slightly short of being sustainable, she genuinely gets no poise at all. To make Faust's poise sustainable in any way, you need Ryoshu's Thoracalgia, and you need to play around Pride Resonance to activate Nebulizer Beta. There is effectively no other simple way to make She-Faust's poise good. You just need to bite the bullet and use the mandatory ego skill. Moving on to Faust's Blade mode, it has issues of its own, namely the low damage Faust's skills do. At their best, the skills of She-Faust are pretty good, dealing up to 88% bonus damage while rolling quite well. But that is only true on paper, as reaching that 88% takes very long. Half of Faust's damage conditionals on skills 2 and 3 come from poise, and we've already been over the fact that it takes a while to get that poise up and running, so you won't be dealing good damage out of the box. The other half of Faust's bonus damage comes from arrows that Faust has spent. Somehow, maxing out this conditional takes even longer, with a minimum of 8 turns being spent shooting in order to give Faust that 44%. Of course, you can shoot once or twice, but even that takes a while in single wave fights, so getting this damage bonus in an adequate time frame is another tall order, or rather, it's just straight up impossible. But really, Faust's Blade mode is not where her biggest sins lie. Sure, it's not great, and honestly not even good, but it's, at the very least, kind of salvageable, if your standards are low. The real issues start being apparent when you look into her bow stance gimmick. Using Faust's strongest skill 3-2 requires her to stand AFK for 4 turns. Yes, that's right. The earliest turn where you get access to a max power bow's glimmer is turn 5, and you are forced to make Faust just guard and do nothing else for the entirety of the 4 turns that came before that. This is awful tempo for any skill. But do you know what the worst part is? The strongest bow's glimmer doesn't even do that much damage. The damage of the skill is comparable to that of full stop Heathcliff's nuke, which is a good skill, yeah, but not so good that you would sacrifice a total of 5 turns for it. So basically, the bow gimmick is terrible. In no story fight do you benefit from standing still for 4 turns, especially when most things die in 6 or less consistently. You can try justifying the insanely long wind-up for Refraction Railway with its long sections, but in the best case scenario, getting value out of this gimmick is only possible if Faust gets hard carried through a wave by her allies, just to land one shot on an upcoming enemy. In that case, literally any ID that can deal decent damage and hold its own would be better. Funnily enough, insanely slow tempo is not all there is to complain about with this gimmick, as the bow mode sees even more issues. Faust's guard is normal, not clashable, which is not that big of a deal, except the fact that it cannot generate SP for Faust, meaning you're going to shoot bow's glimmer at 0 SP, unless you spend more turns at the beginning of the fight preparing SP to be able to prepare your setup for the one shot on like turn 7. Notably, bow's glimmer itself is also used at combat start, likely to resemble how ranged pages worked in Library of Ruina. And yes, this skill cannot clash either, so no SP for you once again. But wait, there's more. You know how Faust's passive makes her defensive skill count as a skill 3 for bow's glimmer purposes at max stack of target aim? Well, that effect turns off if you have a skill 3 on the dashboard, making you convert the skill 3 instead of pressing guard. This, in itself, is not a problematic mechanic at its core. However, for some reason, the effect also checks the upcoming skills, meaning that if you have spent 4 turns setting up your shot, and on the 5th Faust's skill 3 shows up as upcoming, you cannot use the strongest version of bow's glimmer, as the defensive skill will not turn into a skill 3. And the skill 3 itself is not selectable yet, making you waste yet another turn to set up the strongest skill. That being said, with how insanely long the wind-up is already, you're likely to not run into this issue often. Finally, my last issue with bow's glimmer are the effects that it inflicts. Lodged arrow is an effect that slowly adds bleed to an enemy over the course of the fight. Doesn't sound too bad when described this way, but remember that you need to hit at least one of these slow tempo shots to even inflict one stack, and the effect is not valuable at all until you have at least 2. So, once again, any kind of value from Lodged Arrow is hidden behind at least 4 turns of Faust doing very little, and the value that you get is 1 fragile. Reminder, you can just get more damage, by using a decent identity instead of running one who does all this just to slightly weaken an enemy. The final thing I want to call out is Faust's support passive. It gives pierce damage up to the ally that inflicted the most bleed last turn. This is not the worst effect in the world, but do note that the unit with the highest bleed infliction will often be Kurokumo Heathcliff, a mono-slash identity that gets absolutely nothing from this effect. And of course, in bleed, this is competing with Whispers, and I would not make that change. So, should you use Faust? And if so, where? Well, okay, this is a dumb question to ask after such a long list of issues. Overall, Faust's bow gimmick is awful, as it's insanely slow and the payoff does not justify the setup at all. And if looked at purely with her normal skills in mind, Faust is just below average. She doesn't hit her conditionals unless you spoon-feed her a Ryoshu Thoracalgia and a constant stream of Pride Absolute Resonance. And her biggest accomplishment is having okay bleed infliction. Which is funny, because in bleed, she can't have enough Pride Resonance to sustain poise, so she's conditionless once again. At best, Faust is an identity that works in the mirror dungeons, because everything works there. And at worst, there is no reason to pick her up. At all. But I promised to end off with a glimmer of hope, and I will do exactly that. We're getting another Walpurgis Night this season, and I am confident that we'll delve into the She Association characters introduced in Library of Ruina. And among these characters is Yujin, who I fully expect to act in the same way as Mentor Merceau, giving buffs to all allies from her faction. And hopefully, Faust was deliberately released in this underpowered state, so that she can receive those buffs and not be broken, when Yujin does come around. Is this baseless speculation? Yes, it is. Is this scope? Probably. But honestly, this is what I believe to be the reason for Faust's terrible performance on her release. So yeah, the idea is not worth your time or resources, at least for now. I strongly recommend sitting this one out. And I know that many of you just want to see the new unit glazed and hyped up, but I've established already that I'm not here to yes-man your impulsive purchases. Faust is not good, and I hope we can all agree on that. Hopefully, she'll get better with time though. Okay, well, this is about it for our newest addition to the Forgotten Association. Faust is disappointing, but I am 90% sure she is deliberately underpowered so she can be buffed by a team leader later. Or she could be paying the Mao Faust tax. I'm not sure. Anyways, if you disagree or have something to add, leave a comment below, and I probably won't read them, because if I see cope for this unit, the last drops of my faith in this community will evaporate. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like to let me know, and if you want to see more like this, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!